All right.
Hello, Jon Taylor. I'm privileged to get to work with you today. It's been a long time.
Yeah. Someone had contacted me and they said, I found your podcast, your video podcast. And I was thinking like, I don't have a video podcast. I'm like, yeah, you do it with that blonde lady. And I was like, who's that? I was like, oh, Tammy. Yeah. Um, this is the original arrangement we had.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So I started last time a bit of a series about how thinking errors can impact our relationships. And so we talked last time about, we called it the I'm good, you're bad bias. The real name for it is motive attribution asymmetry. We're going to look at another thinking error, a cognitive bias that I think really impacts relationships and recovery. And that's the tendency that we have to move into bargaining thinking or if then thinking. I see this all the time with individuals and couples early in recovery. And the essential structure of a bargain is if I this, then that will happen. Bargaining is a part of the grief process. It's usually what we arrive at after the anger phase. And that's when we start recognizing the reality of our situation. And we're still committed to and convinced to change the fundamental structure of our situation. So bargaining and addiction can look like, actual bargaining with God. God, if you'll remove this desire from me, then I will, be the most faithful servant you've ever had. Or, um, the magical thinking can be, we can do it in relationships all the time. Both parties, both partners can have an expectation. If sobriety happens, then our relationship woes go away. This is another form, another word for this thinking error is magical thinking. And that doesn't mean that when we think this way that we're stupid or we're naive. To me, it means that we're desperate, that we really want a miracle. We're really lobbying for a big change because where we're at is really miserable and we don't know another way out. In relationships, when we do this bargaining kind of thinking, that if then this that, it leads to implicit one-sided agreements. So that means within myself, I've decided this is how this is going to happen, and I start expecting everyone around me to play along with the rules that I'm setting. Ultimately, this results in resentment and disappointment, especially that implicit part. Implicit means that we essentially, what implicit means is that we've made an assumption without checking it out. So with addicts that I work with, some of those bargaining agreements that they make with relation to their relationships are things like, if I get into recovery, then my spouse will heal. And usually I'll see the addicts that I work with, they're expecting their spouse to heal and recover at the same rate that the addict does. Now, there's a lot of reasons that in reality it doesn't happen that way. But I hear very often, why isn't she or he getting better? Because I'm doing better. Another one of those bargaining statements might be, if I get sober, then I'll be happy. The truth about our relationships is when we're heavy in addiction, we're seeing our relationship through a filter. And that filter can be, we may have extra negativity, extra resentment. We may also idealize the relationships that we're in. So it's not that getting sober will make you happy. It's that getting sober will put you in more connection with the truth. And some of that truth you may really like, and other parts of that truth you may not. But you can't bargain your way out of truth. Truth is truth. Another one I see is, if I'm honest, my spouse won't be angry. Sometimes what you have to be honest about, the only appropriate response is anger. And it's not a matter of, your betrayed partner doing well in his or her recovery. It's not about how angry they are. In fact, a lot of the spouses that I work with, a key part of their recovery is reclaiming their right to be angry. Being able to feel that, being able to place that, and being able to be effective with it. So a lot of addicts that I work with, one of the reasons why sex and porn addiction is so alluring is because there's not confrontation. That's a one person regulation system. So they can have a really hard time dealing with anger, and they can make all sorts of bargains in themselves about how they're going to make their spouse's anger go away. That's, again, some of that magical thinking. If my spouse gets into recovery, then they will fix their problems. So we can make these bargains all the time. This is what recovery for my spouse is going to mean. It means that they'll stop nagging me. It means that they won't ask questions that make me uncomfortable. They'll quit doing controlling or behavior that I see as controlling and manipulative, and I will have the ideal spouse as they work their recovery program. The truth is, we don't get to plot the course for anybody in their recovery. I see recovery as more of a turning ourselves over to a very organic process. And the vast majority of the time when I see somebody really work a recovery process, they come out on the other end in a completely unexpected way. Usually the way that they come out is much better than they anticipated. They didn't even know that that could exist, but it requires that surrender to the process. I really don't know where this is headed, but we'll see. Another one I see with addicts a lot is if I give up acting out, sex will have to be boring. So the bargaining can go both ways. It's not just what I'm hoping for. It can also be this contrived, here's what the future must be if XYZ happens. So the bottom line for the addicts out there and the addicts that I work with is bargaining gets you in a distorted place. Bargaining leads, it severs your contact with reality, and it's you creating a world for yourself. For spouses and family that I work with, some of the bargaining statements is if my addicted partner goes to a meeting, then they'll get sober. I know a lot of people who have been in meetings for extended periods of time and sobriety hasn't happened yet. That doesn't mean that the meeting's ineffective or that their attendance is ineffective. It means we haven't quite figured it out yet. It's not necessarily a one-to-one thing there. If my spouse gets sober, then things will get better. Another way of putting that is all of the issues in our relationship are addiction centric. And once we take care of addiction, no more relationship issues. Now, I'd say early in recovery, it's not the time to look at the relationship issues as a whole and say, this is what we have to work on long term. Early in recovery, we have to focus on addiction and getting sober because it's such a pervasive lens. But I work with a lot of spouses who end up hurt and disappointed because when he's sober, he's still a jerk, or when he's sober, he's still not good at being in relationships. That's, to me, that's the second leg of recovery. We get sober and then we get relational. Another one I see often is if I get better, then my spouse will get better. There are plenty of spouses out there that I've worked with that their commitment to recovery and getting better has had little impact on their addicted partner. And that's not because they've done anything wrong or that they don't have real recovery. It's because at the end of the day, we make our own choices. And we can certainly lobby our partner to make better choices. We can certainly set the stage so that healthier choices are easier for the people around us to make. But at the end of the day, getting healthy and relational is a choice that we make. And some people just don't make that choice. So this one-sided thinking, it doesn't take into account the complexity and inevitability of systems. It's a form of control. It's a form of making the world a simpler place than it actually is. It helps in the short term. It makes it feel like we're cutting down on the tension and the heartache that comes with confusing, complicated situations. One of the things, though, that keeps me engaged as a professional is I'm always dealing with something that's more than I understand. I'm always needing to learn. I never see the same thing twice. There's parts of that are exciting, and there's parts of that are really exhausting. And that's the truth of it. I think for couples, it tends to be more exhausting than exciting. This is a constant process for us. We won't ever figure this out. We may get to times where our recipe that we know is working better than other times, and then other times we're having to add new ingredients to the recipe to get it to work. And it's this constant evolving situation. So I always like to offer some concrete tools in this. So here's some concrete tools if you find yourself in this bargaining type of thinking, if you're doing the if this, then that. And all of these fall under the category of addressing the implicit nature of our bargaining. So in other words, one way to attack this is to make what you want explicit. So we were talking about the one person system that is bargaining. You may attempt to negotiate, or you may talk with your partner about moving to a two-person system. So you may negotiate something like, we can both agree that we're seeking healing, right? This is what we're both going for. Okay, I know you want that, I want that. Let's both commit to each other that we'll do what we can to seek that for ourselves and support that in each other. So it's not a matter of, I'm sitting back and you need to do this to make it better for me. It's you're working your process, I'm working my process, and we will work together when we can. We'll support each other as we can. It may be negotiating something like, I hear this often when I'm working with both addicts and partners, is my spouse thinks that I have a problem with XYZ and they couldn't be more wrong. Being able to negotiate something like, I'll always take your concerns into consideration. I'll go to my sponsor, I'll go to my support system, I'll go to my therapist with that. I need help checking my blind spots. I can agree to that I can't see everything. So instead of moving into this, if you will see this, then this will happen, or if I do this, then this will happen, we move into a system where we're helping each other. I know you can't see that blind spot, and I know that me seeing that blind spot may not make it your top priority. That's fine. As long as I know that you're considering it and you're taking it seriously, I can live with that. Another type of negotiation might be, when it comes to our relationship, we'll work on keeping our expectations for now realistic. Again, in long-term recovery and in building really strong relationships, we need to have high expectations when we're ready to push like that. For a lot of addicts and a lot of spouses early in recovery, they're in a relationship where they're used to going it on their own and not relying on each other. So that's the first hurdle to overcome. We have to address the ways that we've kind of cordoned ourselves off, that we've stopped leaning into the relationship before we can actually start leaning into the relationship and utilizing it. So early in recovery, keeping our expectations calibrated is useful. For addicts, that may be understanding that whenever you share truth, it will be painful for your spouse. They may not have moved to the place now, or it may be a while, and they may not ever get there where they supersede the pain of betrayal. That's not necessary for them to do that. What's necessary is for you to have a realistic expectation that your partner will have feelings when you're not there for them, and they should, and that's fine. The last place to negotiate might be something like, we both want something fantastic for and with each other. Can we agree that we'll work towards that always? That's part of that ever evolving recipe. Sometimes the recipe that works for getting something fantastic for and with each other is, I've got some stuff to do and you've got some stuff to do. Let's hunker down and let's both come back to this relationship better than we were before. Sometimes it's, we've got to come together and we've got to hash something out. There's this thing happening between you and I that we've got to figure out. I would say that it's never one or the other. Very rarely do I find a situation, or very rarely do I see one of those approaches as, you've always got to work it out separately, or you've always got to work this out together. It's kind of reading the situation. So agreeing to that standard of, we'll have some flexibility here. Sometimes we'll be working really hard shoulder to shoulder, and sometimes we'll be in our separate corners working. But the bottom line is, we're going to keep working towards this because we want to give each other something better. So that is bargaining, and a couple of ideas for coming out of bargaining.
Yeah, I was thinking, even if we're doing things separately, I can't help but think, if I'm communicating and going like, I'm really working on this, but here's where I'm at, just kind of like a progress report of, I found I've needed some more support around this, but just the communication. But I was thinking, all of this requires communication,
Yes.
and that's such a challenge, especially, when, like, as you said, it's in addiction, I'm like all about, me, and, I'm going to figure this out. I hear all the time people reaching out and going, I need to get this under control. And that's, go, I'm sorry, you're never going to get addiction under control.
Yeah.
You're never, if you're a partner, you're never going to get your spouse under control. It's like, that's just not what addiction is. So having the communication and the grace, the magical thinking, though, I could so relate. I mean, I remember, and I've been in recovery a while, but I remember the magical thinking, please, let me do this differently. If you'll give me, dear God, if you give me, sobriety tomorrow, and I promise I'll be, a saint. It didn't happen, and I'm not, but what I did get was people in my life and a program, and tools to be able to move forward, in a very different direction. But
Mhm.
the that and I hear often, really, with, if I stop the chemicals, then all the sex addiction, all the porn, all that's going to go away. Or so often, from partners too, it's like, well, I think he's in recovery, I think he stopped all that behavior, but just like you said, he's still a jerk, and we don't communicate, and he's still isolated, and so it is a process. And I think having the clarity that this isn't going to magically go away. The addiction, the behaviors that underlie the addiction didn't just happen. I mean, those are old wounds, old stuff. So peeling away those layers, takes time. But I really wanted to encourage, when people, if you're struggling with some of this stuff, get professional help. Get somebody who knows what they're doing to be able to guide you. And like you said, working on the relationship stuff too early. Yeah, I mean, that just hasn't. I haven't heard from my experience that that's been effective, but to get professional support when you go, okay, here's where we're at, here's where we could use a little guidance and support, helping set the framework with, how do we negotiate this, how do we do this, how do we have realistic expectations for ourselves, and for the relationship, for each other, and so that it isn't creating a shaming experience. Um, so that's my 2 cents on that. Great topic. I'm going to have to go back and listen to part one. So, okay. So, first question comes from someone. It says, looking for help to do in this situation. I'm 2 years sober, working on the relationship. I'm committed to truth telling, but still get stuck in small, dumb lies that have no consequence, but still wrong. When I commit to truth, my wife says, thank you, and I appreciate it. Now, please, let's clear the air and share with me in this safe space some lies or omissions that need clearing up. The problem is that I sincerely cannot think of any, because A, I feel I'm being put on the spot, and B, I can't really think of any. I feel like she feels like I have some in my back pocket that I'm holding on to and too scared to say, but I don't. She understandably does not believe me.
Yeah, I appreciate where you're coming from with this question. And the big thing that I hear missing is, between commitment and delivery, I don't hear a process. So how are you going to get, this even goes beyond rigorous honesty. I would call it ridiculous honesty. How are you going to get ridiculously honest? A couple suggestions I would have for that. This is where a sponsor or a support group plays a really key role. If you know that you have a tendency to lie about dumb stuff, and while the lies themselves may not be detrimental, the fact that you go to that as a way of coping, it is, and it is concerning. You probably need someone every day that you can check in with on the lies that you told, and you may need to start tracking them. So you may carry around a little notebook, and it may be as simple as, you arrived at work and somebody asked you how you were doing and you're feeling awful, and you said, I'm great. So you go and you write, I said I was great, when the truth is I'm feeling awful. You need to track this stuff. You need to hold yourself accountable, and you need to have a fair witness. And I would say that the person that you practice this with, I don't know that it should be your spouse right out of the gate. With your spouse, you may want to go back and talk to, here's what I'm working on and here's the progress that I'm making. But to burden your spouse with every little lie that you're telling, I think that's a recipe to overload both of you. A sponsor or a support person is someone who can help you hold this and focus on this, because it takes a lot of reprocessing in your brain. You have to set yourself up to become more accountable and aware of this. It needs to be like focus number one for you if you want to make progress on this. Otherwise, you'll be one of those people, and I can hear it here when you're saying, my spouse asked me if there's a lie and I can't think of any because I feel on the spot and I really can't think of any. What you're not saying is there's not any there. I know there are, because I lie about dumb stuff all the time. You got to increase your awareness if you want to overcome this. Behavior that we monitor tends to change. And so the whole intervention here is not, here's how you're going to stop lying. It's watch it closer, and you'll very most likely notice some changes start to happen. But get accountable, record the lies, even the small ones, get ridiculously honest.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, and like even put a calendar reminder, at noon, have I lied this morning, and then so that there's real accountability, but also monitoring the lies I tell myself, oh, that didn't really matter, or I didn't really matter when I told my colleague I'm fine, like those kind of lies. So the ridiculous, I like that, ridiculously honest, it is important. One of the things, and one of the things our clinical director says all the time to the guys in our treatment program is tell the truth and tell it faster. I do think, the spans of time, is problematic, and your spouse clearly is, feeling that as well, that they're okay, it's been a month and now you're coming to this. So there's got to be a whole bunch of other things, in the pile. But I really agree, a sponsor accountability to partner of like, I'm really working on this, I'm working with my sponsor, having a plan, I suspect will go a long way to helping. But I love that you're here and you're asking about this. I mean, that shows
Right.
that, a willingness to learn to do things differently, which is what recovery is all about.
Yep.
Okay, I'm in separation for 8 years. Oh my gosh, and my husband doesn't want me back. Recently, I started talking to a new guy, and he says all the time that I'm always judging him and withdraw and acting like I'm not good. I'm highly attracted to him, but he mentioned sex earlier in his talks to me. Then I started feeling like a red flag. Should I stop talking to him? I never saw him, and I feel so lonely that it hurts. Oh, eight
So
months. It says 8 months. So there's, it's still, thank you. Cause I was like, 8 years, that's horrible. Okay. All right.
the big thing that stands out to me here is that last line. I never saw him. I feel so lonely that it hurts. The question I'd encourage you to ask yourself, is that the position you want to be in to build any new relationship, where you're so lonely that you're in pain? Keep in mind there's a filter that comes with that. My rule of thumb in relationships, if you're wondering that something's a red flag, you probably need to treat it as such. It deserves investigation, not just somebody saying, oh, don't worry about that, or do worry about that and end the relationship. You need to do some more thinking on this. I hope that you've got some recovery support. I hope you've got a sponsor. I hope you've got some support people you can reach out to and talk to about what's going on. 8 months post separation too, there's going to be a lot of grief there. I can hear that in the beginning of how you talked, like this relationship with your husband is not ending amicably or peacefully. So you've got to be in a lot of pain. And 8 months is a short amount of time to really process through that. So the big question I'd encourage you to ask is, do I feel like I'm in a place where I'm stable enough to have a shot at a healthy relationship? Do I feel grounded? That's where healthy relationships come from, is two people who are committed to staying grounded and honest with one another. And just like we talked in, I was going to say the previous caller, with the previous question, that stability and that clarity, it's a process. And saying we're committed to it is very different from actually delivering on that. So I'd look first and foremost, am I delivering on what I want my recovery to bring me? Am I at peace? Am I connected? Am I sober? Do I know how to handle my tough emotions in ways that I don't regret down the road? That's where I would look first. And then, as a rule of thumb, if you're wondering if it's a red flag, treat it as such.
Yeah, I'm going huge red flag
Yeah.
with lights on it. One of the things, a practical thing is, I was divorced, and in between, I have a fantastic husband now, but I made a list of, if I never get in another relationship, I'm okay. But if I do, here's what I'm looking for. And I was very clear on that list. And it wasn't a long list about, all these extraneous things. It was like character, like this is the kind of person I want, somebody who's going to partner with me, treat me well, those kind of things. And And I abhor smoking. So it was, he would be a non-smoker, and so, I mean, like those kind of things. But, like it's really easy to fall into the emotions. And I know that this hurts, and you're probably dealing with the hurt from the
Mhm.
husband as well. But giving yourself some time to grieve, but getting a posse. Dr. Rob talks about this all the time, is having a dating posse. And it's a numbers game, and it isn't, that the next person is going to be the most fantastic. It's like, okay, make sure you take those shiny Christmas lights off, and what is this person really? And I'm like, okay, this, huge red flags, and you're identifying that. But what would a person, if you were in a relationship, what would that person be like for you? How would they treat you? How would you treat them? Having that framework, and then having a posse of people that can go, oh yeah, you're hanging Christmas lights on him. You're missing, like you talked about, John, like, all the blind spots. You want somebody that's got your back and is able to address those blind spots as well. So, but glad you're here. There are healthy relationships. You deserve one, but there's more work to be done between now and then. So,
And
okay.
good relationships come most from what's behind the scenes, not from the interaction between the two people. And I can't endorse that idea enough of have a posse. Don't go into any relationships alone. Um, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a village to get you healthy in relationships.
Yeah, well, and I want people that are going to be able to, go, yeah, that's a good one, or oof, you're
Mhm.
missing, you're missing all the rubbish that's, coming along with that particular one. So, my wife of 12 years asked for a divorce back in August. We tried to reconcile, and in therapy, I disclosed my use of porn in the marriage and other lies, no physical or emotional affairs, no chat rooms, in November. She then filed for divorce. In January, for the first time, she allowed me back in the house. In the first week of January, we spent the night together and slept in the same bed for the first time since August. I stayed a few more nights, and I thought things could progress towards reconciliation. The opposite occurred. We shared emotional phone conversations, but now, the last 10 days, she became more distant and now won't come anywhere near me when we exchange the kids. Did our nights together short circuit her recovery? Ooh, that's a great question.
Yeah. To answer the direct question, I'd have to know more about what those nights looked like. I'll give you a general impression, though, of what I'm hearing here. Um, Especially when divorce is on the table, I think it's really easy to uh, underest- underestimate the fragility of the relationship. Now, I want to be really clear. I'm not saying the fragility of the individuals. I'm saying the fragility of the relationship. Your relationship is it's an artifact. It's a thing that exists, and it holds things. We put things on the relationship, tasks, worries, concerns, needs. And if the relationship is not strong enough to hold those, what we can find is, with the best intention reaches and the best intention, I'm going to park this here for a minute, we can tend to uh, do damage to the relationship rather than repair it. Um, and what I'm reading here is there's still, a divorce process going on. Um, I know for me, in the position that I'm in right now, I would feel weird about sharing a bed with somebody who I'm working on dissolving my relationship with. Um, that being said, if I were in your situation, it probably wouldn't look that clear to me. So I don't want that to come across with any shame. But I can see some incongruities. I can see some places there where we've allowed to be put on the relationship what the relationship can't hold, and the relationship is acting predictably, which is there's breakdown, there's fear. Um, that pursuing divorce on the table, I think it is going to put a cloud over anything that looks like or feels like reconciliation. And my recommendation when I'm working with couples is, um, if we're in this, we're in this, and we're working on it without divorce looming. Or if we're getting out of this, we're getting out of this. And we may be looking at how to co-parent, but we're not looking at resolving relationship issues. Um, the divorce pursuit is a trump card, and it kind of sets the tone. it sets the level of ability that the relationship has. And that's the biggest thing that I hear here, is that you may have put something on your relationship that it wasn't in a condition to hold. And if that's the case, what you're describing as a response makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I was thinking it was like all or nothing, it's
Yeah.
like, there's no, we had coffee together, or, like there was no, it was like we weren't talking, and then all of a sudden we're sharing a bed again in the
Yeah.
house. So challenging. But I would love for you to talk more about co-parenting too, because now we won't come anywhere near me when we exchange the kids. And I'm like, the two of you as the adults learning to navigate a path, because your kids don't deserve to have, well, dad can't come to this and mom can't come to that, so you'll co-parent, you'll co-grandparent, so you come into a place that is helpful for your children, regardless of you may not be able to stand each other, but at some point you need to find a path so that you can co-parent. So, thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's really what's most at stake here, is the impact on your children. They're victims in this, and that doesn't make you and your spouse perpetrators, but they're the ones who don't have a say in this. And for me, governing principles are absolutely essential in making any relationship work. That's essentially um, the principles that we'll abide by no matter what's happening. For example, for me, in any relationship that I have, whether it's intimate or whether it's professional, if it's going to be collaborative, kindness and respect has to be there. I won't do collaboration if there's not respect. Um, and so what that looks like is, if I'm out of alignment with that governing principle, if I've worked with a collaborator and they feel disrespected, the only correct response from me, if I want to continue that collaboration, is I'm sorry. And I'm sorry costs me nothing, because it's actually not a debate around who's wrong or right. It's about getting back in sync with what the relationship needs to do. When it comes to co-parenting, there's a lot of garbage you and your spouse might have between the two of you, and orienting to, what do our kids need? Well, they need to not be shuttled across the battlefield. So whatever it takes to get to that point where the kids don't have to be in that tense situation, if that's hearing your spouse out and she's saying it felt so unsafe because blah blah blah, you listen to that and you apologize, because apology costs you nothing. um, if that requires, hey, we need to talk about how we're going to keep our stuff um, separate and we're going to show up for the kids, there can be a lot of hurt feelings that might need to be swallowed, or a lot of uncomfortable situations you might put yourself in as a result of that. But again, the governing principle is, we're not going to put our kids in any compounding, damaging situations. The situation's hurtful enough for them. We're going to protect them first and foremost. Was it
Yeah,
really?
and
Yeah, I mean,
well, and I think one of the she's the mother of your children, you're the father of her children, and so the respect of, like, I chose to be with this person, we have children as part of this, that I think finding the level of respect, regardless of all the garbage you're carrying around, can be really helpful. But yeah, I'm always worried about the kiddos. So
yeah.
okay. So the next question, is it a good time to seek couples counseling if the addict has been working my recovery now a year, 1.5 years with a CSAT, going to group therapy and attending multiple SAA meetings? My spouse and I are separated now for a year and a half. My spouse had gone to her therapist, but that ended last February. We have had a full disclosure, but the trust is still a big issue.
Um, I like where the time frames are at. I like the work that your partner's been able to do. Those are all positive indications that couples therapy might be indicated. For me, the bigger indication is, do you both want the marriage? Separation is not a trial for divorce. It's not a trial run of divorce, but it is a time to spend some time in your own skin, your own thoughts, your own feelings. And that would be something for the two of you to talk about after this year and a half. Like, are we still desirous of each other? do we want to make this work? Do we feel like we're the same people, or do we feel like we have enough of the same reasons to make this work as we did when we tried it the first time? Would be the first thing to look at. The second thing to look at for the two of you, and this is one of the biggest things that I see and I worry about with couples dealing with SA, is are both of you in a place where you can hold enough of your emotional ground and your emotional truth? Because couples therapy is not effective if it's a tug of war. Yeah, I'll come to your side, but I really don't know why I'm compromising. So what that means is I'm going to yank really far to my side. It's, are we in a place where we're ready to speak truth to one another? And are we in a place where when we speak that truth, we don't automatically back off when that truth is difficult for our partner to handle? So those would be the questions that I look at. Logistically, again, like I said, I like the period of time and I like the things that your partner's been engaged with, but more to the point is this what we want? Are we committed to working things through? Are we committed to seeing if we can work things through? And are we in a place where we're really ready to be rigorously honest with one another, and really put the issues out on the table so we can work on them?
So, and a couple of things I read. First of all, a year and a half. So, like when people are separated for a year and a half, if there isn't a plan one way or the other, kind of like you said, divorce or not divorce, but like then you're kind of in this holding pattern, which can get to be, a thing unto itself. So, I do think working with somebody. My one concern is my spouse had gone to her therapist, but that ended last February. So that's been a year of no therapy now, maybe doesn't need it, maybe getting a lot of support, with the drop-in groups or something else. But I would want to make sure that the spouse is feeling that there is support, because when you go to a couples therapist, the relationship is the client. It isn't either of you, it's the relationship. So making sure that you've got the framework. This person did add, we do want to make the marriage work, so that's great, that
Yeah.
you want to start from there.
Couples that I work with, there's always plenty that comes up in couples therapy that needs individual support. And that's another thing you want to make sure, again, really good advice there, Tammy. I think that needs to be on the table for both of you, that individual therapy is probably something we need to be willing to do if we're going to get back into couples therapy. At least have it in our back pocket ready to go. If not, do them simultaneously. Because again, after, like you said, Tammy, after that year and a half, that's a long time to have separation, and coming back into relationship space. It will be jarring in some ways. So make sure that you're individually supported so that the focus can stay on the relationship, and one or both of you don't hijack that with individual things that are coming up, but that you have support from all angles and are able to. Couples work is intense, and you want to make sure that you're ready to hold what comes up there.
Yeah, and have support to be able to do that. So okay, next question. Could you give some examples? What expectations should I have for myself to share with my husband? My husband acted out and porn since dating 43 years together, and replaced 30 years ago with his addiction. He's a heavy drinker the last 15 years, and same sex acting out for 50 years. Lots of pain, rejection, trauma. 4 years D-Day, 3 years formal disclosure, 2 years separated because of his lies and relapses. He has 100 days, he says, sober. I see small changes and stop drinking. We are stopping divorce to work on our marriage. My fear and distrust is consuming, understandably. So
That's what I was going to say. What expectations should I have for
yes,
myself? I would expect that you're going to be reeling, and I think that's really important for you to honor. Um, I see a lot of times when it comes to willingness, and even ability to trust a relationship, a lot of times addicts in recovery feel like they're in a place to do that before their spouses feel like they're in a place to do that. And that's fine. You shouldn't be in the same place that he's in. That would be another expectation, is that um, your motivations for coming together, your motivations for working things out may be very different. And because of that, you'll feel differently about things. Like I hear in this, when you say my fear and distrust is consuming, your motivation is to feel safe and secure. Your partner's motivation may be, I just don't want to lose my marriage. And there's a big difference between I want to be safe and secure and I don't want to lose my marriage. Um, so I would expect from yourself that you may not know for a while which way's up or what to do. There again, I'll echo what some of Tammy said earlier on. Make sure you have a good posse. Make sure you have lots of compassionate people who know your story, who can help you hold some of the pain and the confusion in this. I think this is definitely a place where um, commitments and decisions, you can expect to not feel good about any commitments or decisions, because I think it'll take a while to get on some firm footing for both of you. You know, you said in parentheses here, he's 100 days sober. He says, you know, to me, that's an example of we're not on firm footing yet, maybe heading in a promising direction, maybe. But I would say don't sell yourself short by making plans for a relationship based on what it could be. Stay really focused on how you feel and on how the relationship feels right now. And don't let your partner's opinion of what you should be feeling or how much you should be forgiving, don't let that get in the way of your grief, and the work that you need to do to recover from this. Again, just I had the same reaction Tammy had after reading through it. It was like, whoa, that's a lot. um, that's a lot, and that's okay that you have a fear and a distrust that's consuming, because I think there's going to be a lot of repair. This kind of hurt didn't happen overnight, and the repair is not going to happen in 100 days of sobriety.
Right. You share 2 years separated because of his lies and relapses. So 100 days, even 100 days compared to 2 years is, still a fraction, but a hundred
Yeah.
days compared to 50 years is, I mean, that's just, I would really want to see, him actively working. Like if he's just saying he's sober, sure, you're going to see a difference, some small changes, like just stopping drinking. But it isn't sustainable if he isn't doing some really heavy lifting and recovery, because
Yeah.
that's a huge, I mean, that's most of his life has been in some form of acting out, escaping, numbing out, dissociation. So that's the stuff that really requires a lot of support and help. Working with a therapist, even a really good therapist like Jon, once a week isn't going to cut it. That's just too much. So hopefully he's getting a higher level of help. Hopefully he's getting, more support. Hopefully you're getting more support. Hopefully, there's Old Ladies Posse precedes this one, but tomorrow is there's another Betrayed Partners group. There's another one Thursday morning. So, keep plugging into these resources, and be really kind to yourself, because that's a lot of trauma and grief for you.
That takes me back to kind of that last negotiation that I suggested. In relationships like that, I don't think it provides a lot of security to say we just want to get back to a baseline functioning. It's kind of like, given what you've put me through, I need to know that something pretty fantastic and pretty solid is coming down the pipe. I need to know that that's where your sights are at, because I'm not just looking for a place to stabilize. I really need an ideal place to heal. And so that's where that negotiation, are we both committed to something fantastic for and with each other? And if so, what are we willing to do about that? That's where you said, Tammy, that really intensive therapy, and that you know, put your money where your mouth is, actually work on some of these critical things. Not just getting sober is great, awesome first step. There's a lot more structure we need in place to support a relationship that will be safe enough to feel confident moving forward in.
Yeah, I talk all the time, the stopping the behavior, that's a symptom. It's the underlying
Yeah.
issues. There's a reason that for 50 years, all of this has been going, 50 years or more have, all of this has been going on. So, every one of the clients
Yeah.
that comes to Seeking Integrity has underlying issues, that we want to address those. So it isn't relapse or, just, stopping the behavior. And, like you said earlier, and he's still a jerk because, he's still acting like, an addict. So. there's some
Still
stuff.
a one person system and a two
Yeah.
person system.
Yeah. So somebody commented, in my family of origin, I take the scapegoat role. As such, I left home when I took that role in jobs and relationships, etc. I came into recovery 6 years ago because of my life was chaotic and unmanageable, but it was only about a year ago I realized um, one of my agendas when I came into recovery is what you have been describing. I thought I sorted myself out. People in my life would stop being angry with me, yelling at me and blaming me. I was trying to make myself perfect through recovery. Today, I've let go of expecting them to treat me different and have a better boundaries and don't accept people treating me that way. I also thought all the abuse stuff that was happening to me and around me would stop if I did and said things perfectly. I believe that as I have been told, uh, I believed as they told me they behaved this way because I caused them to. I'm so glad I let go of that idea, although it brought up a lot of grief, letting go of my family of origin. Oh, thank you for sharing that. So,
Yeah, great summary of what we're talking about. Letting go of the bargaining thinking. The next phase in Kubler-Ross's model of grief is not butterflies and roses and acceptance. It's actually depression. Because often when we start seeing a difficult reality or a painful reality for what it is, that doesn't bring peace immediately. That's why we do the bargaining. If there's any other way to feel other than hopeless, crushed, sad, I want to feel that way. That's a very understandable tendency. So he did a really beautiful job there at highlighting that, moving to where we need to on this, it's not a painless process, but in the long run, if we can stop the bargaining and do the grieving, we can have good boundaries, we can have better relationships, we can have a world that's more built in reality rather than one where we're doing impossible backbends all the time, just to have something that feels okay.
yeah, and this person added, "Oh my goodness, yes, I went through depression just before this. I didn't think of that." So, yeah, Sophia Caudle on intherooms.com, she's got a couple of grief groups, and that may be a support. They're free. That may be a support place, for people to plug into as well. As you're navigating this, you're not alone. But what I really love is, yes, you went through depression, but look where you've come out. It's like you understand that you've got good boundaries, that you're the message from your family of origin, that it's you, and if you just behaved right, all of this, you're the root of all the problems. Not true. And it sounds like you're in such a much different and better place for you, so it's worth doing that work. So okay, so then next question is regarding timing to begin couples therapy, similar timing with previous question, and both say they want to stay in the marriage. I am aware that 6 months ago he was looking online at women's profiles, did not bring it up to his therapist, and in fact lied to his therapist and my face about it during disclosure. I do not feel safe letting my walls down with him, and it seems couples therapy is premature. Is my thinking correct? How will I know when he's worked enough on his stuff to for us to begin couples therapy?
I would say that really depends on how your couples therapist approaches couples therapy. Not all forms of couples therapy are created equally, and not all forms of couples therapy are for the same thing. Some are a very cognitive communication based approach. Let's iron out how you're talking about things. And in those forms of couples therapy, honesty is a prerequisite. Like we can't proceed if there's not willingness to be honest. More attachment-based approaches like emotionally focused therapy or like Stan Tatkin's approach, psychobiological approach to couples therapy. I think Dr. Rob had Stan on a podcast a while ago. Those are modalities that I think can hold some of these intricacies and you have to go to somebody who's not just, oh yeah, I know that stuff. Like they should have trained, certified, like they really have to know what they're doing. Because this dynamic of, lying to me and to my therapist, to me, that is a relational issue, not necessarily between you and him, but the way that he sees and experiences and functions in relationships. And with the right couples therapist who can hold that approach from an attachment perspective, from a what's happening in the room right now perspective, sometimes that can help. I hate to say troubleshoot, it makes it sound simple, but that can help troubleshoot some of these types of issues. Um, but it also, again, that goes back to what I said before about the baseline for couples therapy is how do you feel about it? If you're saying no way, no how, he's got to sort this out, I'm not willing to walk in the arena if this is going on, you have a right to set the parameters for that. If you need him to do more of the heavy lifting before you're willing to take a risk and be vulnerable in any way, you have a right to say, I need you to work on this lying issue. I need you to work with your therapist. I need you to work with your sponsor, and set a behavioral benchmark. So that would be like, I need you to work on that. And what I'm looking for is that you can show real remorse for the position that put me in and what that did to me for you to like that would be one example of what I want to see. And that way it's not, hey, you got to work on this. It's here's what I'm looking for. I don't feel safe if you don't see that as a big issue. I don't feel safe because you might be willing to do that again. So a real behavioral benchmark. I want you to work on this. This is what I want to see come out of it. And maybe even a timeline. I think if you go work on this in 6 months, I'd like to see you be able to connect with some empathy around this for me. And then I'd be willing to reconsider couples therapy. But yeah, despite your therapist's approach, at the end of the day, it's how do you feel about it? And, don't completely entrust your safety to somebody else. At the end of the day, you're the one who has the final say in that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I hear often we have a lot of guys that come to treatment who have been lying to their therapist for years. Right now the record is 11 years. I haven't heard longer than that, but 11 years of going to a therapist and lying. I know. I mean, what a waste. It's sad, but I mean, it's terribly sad, but so it's not unusual. I'm sorry. But I heard the analogy that doing couples therapy, when somebody's still lying is like trying to row a boat with one oar. You're just going to go around in circles because you're showing up and you're trying to be honest, but the other person isn't able to do so. So I love that you gave practical tools. And I would even go so far as to say, and empathy for me looks like, because, when you use the term empathy with an addict, it's kind of like, so,
well, I
so
said,
I think,
I'm sorry.
yes, exactly. Or I brought
Yeah.
you flowers and aren't you over this by now? Like I gave you that, spa day. What do you want? So I think having it be very clear and practical of like, this is what I'm looking for,
I need to see it in your eyes. I need to hear it in your voice, and I'll feel it when you're there.
yeah. I trust your gut. To me, when I'm reading, I do not feel safe letting my walls down with him. He is not making it safe yet for you. I'm hopeful. I mean, this is honestly, this is the work that we do at Seeking Integrity Treatment Program. So, if he wants help, that's what we do. So consider that. So I think we've answered all the questions. So
Looks like it.
So okay. It was lovely to see you. So
Yeah.
I actually had an idea. So I'm going to send you an email because I've got of course I've got another idea for you. So I'm going to send you an email. Yeah. Well, you just heard that and it's recorded because I want you. Okay. I'm going to tell you, I want you to come on in the rooms, the Super Saturday Recovery Summit. And I want you to talk about relationships and that's an overall addiction recovery site. So it isn't just addiction recovery from sex addiction and porn addiction. It's like, but all of these skills are really useful. So I'm going to reach out to you. I'll send you an email, but like, it's a great platform and it's really helpful. I love doing that one. So.
Tammy, I could say yes without hearing your proposal because I have on two fronts. I have a goal to say yes more often because my life is more exciting and interesting when I say yes. And I have a short list of people who I don't really need to know the proposal. If they're saying, hey, should we, I know that it's a yes, and you're definitely on that list.
Oh, thank you.
updates.
we've been doing these since last April, and I just did one last weekend, so it's really fresh on my mind. But it's just fascinating topics, and the people are so are grateful, and the point of those is because all these professionals that normally talk to other professionals, we're bringing them in, and like Stan Tatkin did one for us, but we're bringing them in, and they're talking to the recovery community. So, but I'm just thinking, so many people in that are trying to get into recovery struggle with relationships, and then they relapse, and so bringing some practical skills could be really useful. So I'm going to take you on a yes. I'm going to send you an email about it. But thank you all for joining us today, and Scott will probably be back, but I feel grateful that I got to sub in today and get to see you again. So
Good to see you. Thanks, everybody.
all right, bye.
Bye.